Hello, everyone, and welcome to out-of-band kops meeting to kick off Hacktoberfest. Kops is doing Hacktoberfest. We have a bunch of suggested ideas, including, I guess, cluster add-ons, other things, bring your own ideas. I also got on my Raspberry Pi, so I want to try playing with that, adding support for that. But the goal of Hacktoberfest is effectively to encourage new participants and to encourage, I guess, steady participation from people that are existing, for people that need a framing to build out something. It's to encourage that and sort of try to achieve it within the month, I guess, of October. I guess if it goes well, we can do Novemberfest and Advent of Code as well, and proceed every month on this sort of basis. What we are encouraged to do is do introductions. I recognize a lot of, I should also say, sorry. We're also trying to experiment with different times for the kops office hours meeting, which has a bi-weekly meeting at noon Eastern every other Friday. And so we are experimenting with different times, and we'll likely try to do different times for any additional meetings we do for Hacktoberfest. Trying to see which times work for people, both in terms of days of the week and in terms of time zones. And so we started with the 9 a.m. Eastern on the 1st of October, which feels appropriate, but we will undoubtedly investigate others. This is, I guess, this is also a Kubernetes meeting, and so therefore is subject to our Kubernetes code of conduct. And I guess we will put this also on YouTube on the C Cluster Lifecycle channel, assuming that proves appropriate. So please do be mindful of our code of conduct. We don't have too many people yet, but if we do get a lot more people, please do start using, I guess we have a fair number of people, so let's try to use the hand button if we get conflicts on people talking. Otherwise, we're expected we want to be welcoming to everyone, and a good way to get sort of things going is to sort of do introductions, I guess. I recognize most of the people here, but we can still do a round of introductions. I propose we go around and state, I guess, our name, where you work if it's appropriate. Some people have to say it, some people don't want to say it, whatever you prefer. And I guess what you would like to work on as part of Hacktoberfest, or if you don't have any ideas what you're sort of interested in. It doesn't have to be kops, it can be anything you want to, but let's go around, and I'll go first, and then I propose we go through in alphabetical order by the names you use to register with Zoom. So I think, Cyprian, you'll be first. It's going to be a little odd because I don't think the Zoom ones are entirely sorted, which is a little surprising, but I'm sure people can insert themselves. It looks like on my list, Ole and Peter are out of band. And yes, can I suggest if you don't want to do an introduction, just say pass or something, and that's fine. And obviously, just feel free to stay as little or as much as you like. Or if you just remain on mute, we will eventually give up on you. My name is Justin Santa Barbara. I work at Google. I want to experiment with the things I mentioned before, as well as trying to encourage other people and unblock other people that want to participate. So the things I'm interested in for the sort of October scope are around trying to get cluster add-ons into kops. I think Samtoshi, who is here, was a Google Summer of Code participant this year and did some great work in cluster add-ons. And I also want to give a shout out to John Myers, who did some excellent reviews on cluster add-ons and some of the challenges that he sees from the point of view of a kops user in terms of using cluster add-ons. And so I'm hoping to address those concerns using a lot of the work that Samtoshi did that unblocked it. And I do have my Raspberry Pi sitting idle currently over there, which I think is the perfect machine for a kops cluster. Cyprian, do you want to go next?
Yeah, why not? So my name is Cyprian Hackman. I work at Sematext as a DevOps. I started contributing to kops last year and did that steadily, and it was quite fun for me. So hopefully it would be the same for everyone. For Hacktoberfest, I would like to improve the container runtime setup, move it from purely Node app to, well, to kops itself, and make it simpler to add new versions. Also, I am open to helping anyone that has a project or, you know, questions to get started or anything. So don't hesitate to ping me on Slack. Okay, who's next? Peter?
I think technically it's David Muckle. I don't.
Okay.
Yes. Howdy. I'm David Muckle. I work at Sonos on our core engineering cloud infrastructure team. And I'm just really excited to start contributing to kops as a first-time contributor. I'm not entirely sure what there is out there to contribute to in that realm, but I am excited nonetheless.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining, David. One thing which occurs to me on both of those last ones is we should probably set up a Slack channel. I guess we can use kops developers for now. If it becomes unmaintainable, or if there are topics that, if it becomes more of a Hacktoberfest topic and less of a kops topic, we can sort of start a different channel. But let's do kops developers for now and see where we go from there, I guess. I will skip Fireflies. John, you are next in my alphabetical order.
Okay, I'm John Myers. I work for Proofpoint. In kops, I started with working on rolling update and cluster validation, and am now currently working on more PKI security and node bring up.
Thanks, John. I realize that as people talk, they move around in the order list, which is making this difficult. Liebermeer, I see you joined. We're doing quick introductions, if you would like to, of your name, where you work, and any projects you are interested in working on, kops or otherwise, during Hacktoberfest.
Hi, this is Liebermeer. I work for VMware. I participate in sequence lifecycle and mostly the kubeADM project. I saw this invite and I joined the meeting to see how this is going to go.
Thanks, Liebermeer, and welcome. Mike, I think you're next. If I miss anyone, please speak up, but Mike, I think you're next.
Right. I'm Mike Splain. I work also at Sonos with David and Scott. I've been contributing for a while to kops. I think my first contribution, besides some small things, was internal load balancing for the API servers. So that was a long time ago. We needed that. Yeah, so I'm just here to help out wherever I can. People need pointers to things. My life is pretty busy right now, but I'm happy to help out however I can.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to start taking notes. By the way, we have a kops agenda doc. Same principle as I guess with the Slack channel. We have a kops agenda doc. I'm going to put any notes into that meeting notes. We might split off into a new doc should the need arise. But for now, I will try to keep track of any projects that people are interested in there. And please do feel free to add things if you'd like. Nadir, I think you are next.
Yeah, hi, Nadir. I also work at VMware. Kind of here for the same reasons Liebermeer is. I work on cluster API primarily. I'm also kind of interested on how the cluster add-ons stuff goes integration. We need to do that for cluster API as well.
That's wonderful. We can maybe we can do cluster add-ons into both cluster API and kops.
So I think I'm next.
Yes, although you've moved around, but yes.
All right. So I'm Mikhail. I work at Red Hat right now, contributing mainly to the operator lifecycle manager. There's significant crossover with add-ons operators that been slowly trying to integrate for a while. That is bridging into kops. besides that, I would probably like to find some just general things to contribute to. That's about it.
That's great. I actually love that everyone is coming with sort of open mind. I think that's really, really wonderful. Unless I've messed up, which is very likely, Peter, I believe you are next.
My name is Peter. I work at a company called Tune. I've been contributing to kops for a few years now. I've been a maintainer for almost a year. Recently I've been tagging a lot of issues. Well, not a lot, a few issues as help wanted or good first issue labels on GitHub. So hopefully we can use those as a starting point if anyone doesn't have anything particular they want to work on. In terms of stuff I want to work on, I'm hoping that we can improve our end-to-end test coverage. kops has a lot of jobs in test grid, but I'm hoping to improve our coverage even further with specific features that are not currently being tested. So yeah.
Thanks, Peter. That will be really great to see. Scott McCulloch, I believe you're next.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Scott McCullough. As Mike Splain said, I work alongside him and David at Sonos. I also don't really know what I want to get involved in. Mike has been very open about his contributing on kops, and I think alongside David was very interested in seeing if there's any way to get involved and how to do so, and if anything stood out in this meeting to see if there's any way to kind of like push that along. So I'm kind of just open to seeing what there is and how I can get involved.
That's wonderful. Welcome and thank you. Peter pointed out to me that I missed Ole because Ole spoke, so you moved to the top of the list. I apologize. Shall we go back to Ole, who I missed? I apologize.
Hey, I'm Ole Marcus. I'm a head architect at SupportRadar. Yeah, test coverage, maybe getting more stuff working on OpenStack. It's going to be some of the projects I would be interested in, but I'm also happy to assist in any other projects. I've been playing around with various bits of the kops code base now for last 6 months or so.
Wonderful, thank you, Ole. Okay, now I believe it is Simone, but please correct me if I...
I think it is, thank you. My name is Simone, I work at a company called Meltwater. I'm very happy to see this happening in kops. I'm really extremely grateful to the maintainers to take this on. It's great to be part of Oktoberfest. I think for Oktoberfest, I would like to contribute some improvements to the CNI plugin, the AWS CNI plugin, and maybe look at some of the help wanted first issues that are probably at my level that Peter worked on. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And I believe Santoshi, you are next.
Yeah, hello, my name is Santoshi, and I just finished my Google Summer of Code internship with Kubernetes, and I'm here because I'm interested in getting like cluster add-ons into kops, and I'm definitely open to contributing to any other parts of kops. Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Wonderful, thank you, Santoshi. And yeah, it'd be great to collaborate with you on that. Seeing as like following up from all the work you did in Google Summer of Code, that would be really great. I believe we have introduced everyone. I'm just scanning through the list. If I missed you, I apologize, and please speak up while I scan, but I think that is everyone. All right, good. I think next, so we just in the agenda doc, there are 5 of us that had sort of specific things we wanted to work on. And I think a number of us that are more open to work on other things or as things that may arise over time, which is actually a really great ratio. I don't know what we want to, how we best want to do this. if there are people that are interested in pairing up with any projects that they heard other people describing, that's great, and I highly encourage you to do so. We can, I think, coordinate best in the Kubernetes kops developer channel on Slack, which I encourage you to join if you have not done so. And for those of you that are not perhaps kops, primarily kops, we can let's use the channel for now, and we can split off into a new channel if we feel that's necessary. Because I know that some of you are more interested in other C++ lifecycle projects, which is great. And so we did have some people interested in cluster add-ons. We had some E2E. Peter and Ole both cited E2E. The CNI plugin, I think, will be great. Oh, Cyprian, I actually didn't take notes on what you said. You said you wanted, I apologize for that. You said you wanted to work on getting the container runtime support into NodeUp. No, into kops, sorry.
Away from NodeUp, but yeah. And by the way, I also was planning for this release to touch Calico features. So there are a few newer features that are quite interesting, and I wanted to add them to kops. Not sure if anyone is interested. Those would be, at least 2 of them would be beginner level. So if anyone wants to join that, I could help. And one could be a bit more advanced, but not really something extraordinary. So there is already an example for it. So
I think one thing maybe we could do is, if there are issues which people are interested in working on as part of this Hacktoberfest topic, whether in kops or other repos, why don't we label them with a Hacktoberfest label, and make sure that I will make sure that I create like covering issues for my little Raspberry Pi thing, for example. So if there are other topics that are just not covered, please do create a umbrella issue. That was the word I was struggling for. I will make sure that we get a label added to at least the kops repo to add for Hacktoberfest. And then I will figure out what the right way is to get queries going, so that people can sort of see those and coordinate on GitHub, which I think is, like, GitHub is great for asynchronous, and I think Slack is great for synchronous. I don't know if there are any other topics people would like to, if there are topics people would like to discuss in this group. I think one of the other things we could do is we could sort of try to arrange, I guess, breakout meetings or breakout pairings, might be more likely, for people that want to collaborate or that want to generally work on anything or want just sort of introductions to the kops code base. I think there are a couple of people that are, I guess, newer. I'm happy to do a sort of introduction to the kops code base. One way it's hard to, I'd like some feedback on that. Like, it's hard to know how to present what is a large code base to a new person, whether it's better to try to traverse it, whether it's better to, which risks sort of just overload, whether it's better to add a feature and sort of discover it incrementally, which is sort of how I tend to proceed. And then there's a subset of adding the feature where, like, I drive or someone experienced in the code base drives versus pairing and letting someone less experienced in the code base drive that can sort of then ask questions. I am very open to any or doing multiple of those. I don't know what people think is the right way to proceed, or if anyone has experience of trying to do so.
I have some suggestions for issues I like to recommend people take on, things that I think might be a good introduction to the code base.
That would be really great. Do you agree with the idea of tagging them with Hacktoberfest, labeling them with Hacktoberfest for now?
Well, currently I've been using the good first issue tag. Though one of them isn't an issue yet, so I suppose I need to file it.
Yeah, I think my issue with good first issue is it's it's not necessarily specific to Oktoberfest, and like some of them may be older. I know that some people have gone through and cleaned up, which is wonderful. But yes, we can. I suggest we do Oktoberfest just so we sort of maintain some momentum around it. And it looks like, yeah, we lost.
Well, I'll give my ad. It's issue 7119, which is older, but I think it's a good thing for someone to take on as a beginning project. And that would be getting the AWS autoscale group to actually drain nodes when it wants to terminate one. And just figuring out what the system D implications are and the right mechanism to get that done.
That's great. I think one thing we could do right now is actually discuss like what is entailed in that. Like also because I see there are some people here that may have experience from other projects that might want to chime in or may be interested as well. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what's entailed there?
Well, I think part of it is figuring it out. Because I understand there is a way that it will do some system D shutdown, and so I think someone needs to go in and figure out what the right unit file to add in is and what the actual right mechanism is to actually, and then have a piece of code there which will drain the node.
Nadir, I was thinking of you. Is there a? I guess you probably guessed. Is there a drain on shutdown functionality in Cluster API yet, or?
Yeah, but I think we might have a similar issue. So, yeah, that might be a good one to do.
I remember there being something called, I believe it's Drano, but it could be a different trademarked sync unblocker, which I may be infringing upon. So I apologize to anyone whose trademark I stamped on. But I think there was a project called Drano that is, I think, a daemon set that does some of this. I'm just sort of searching for that in the background. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be a COP specific feature.
Actually, I tuned out for a second, but so we use Drano, but there's also a Kubernetes project, the descheduler, Kubernetes descheduler. I don't know if that's solves similar problems.
We're all busy typing in the same two searches, I believe.
Yeah.
So it looks like Drano is, thank you for the links, Nadir. I will, and Mike, I will try to paste them into the doc. It looks like Drano drains on a node condition. It's unclear whether that node condition can come from AWS. And the descheduler I've heard of using in the case where, like you have two nodes and while you're restarting, there's a period where you only have one that's healthy. So everything lands on that one node. And then, both your DNS pods are on that one node. That's the context I've heard it in. I don't know whether it does more. I don't know whether anyone here uses either, whether uses Drano or descheduler or both, particularly for this problem. But
the descheduler seems to define a policy. So if you have pods that you don't want on a certain node, it's going to execute on this policy. I wouldn't say that this is exactly a draining process, however. I wanted to comment in general about including the feature of draining inside a project. It can be tricky because there are cases where users might not want to drain. So, Nadir, did you mention that there's a problem in Cluster API around that?
No, it's not Cluster API. I think we've got some system D tweaks to do around that, just to make sure stuff, like mainly around Kubernetes shutting down. But we do have the drain support, so you can actually say we have all the drain support in terms of on getting rid of a machine. We drain first, and we have options to override that behavior as well. So you can just say, don't drain, I don't care, just get rid of it.
Yeah, because draining can also block. So this is the main problem there. It has to be a tweak, an op for that.
Yes, I think, as I understand, and John, feel free to correct me, the issue is specific to unscheduled auto-scaling termination. So this is using the AWS autoscaler, or I guess using spot instances where you cannot predict easily there's another link. Oh, you cannot predict easily that a node is going to go away. It is not initiated by the user. It's initiated by AWS. And so AWS gives you, let's say, 30 seconds heads up that your node is about to shut down. And the question is, what do you want to do in those 30 seconds? And at the end of 30 seconds, you shut down, is my understanding. It isn't that you...
Yeah, well, Spot, you have a time limit, but it's also the case where the ASG decides that it's too big and it wants to make it smaller. So it's, it's trying to scale down the instance group. And in that case, you pretty much have as much as long as you need. But you do want to get those pods drained, possibly respecting any disruption budgets.
This actually sounds like a great issue. I've copied these links into our doc. I put the number, which I think is 9119, but I could be wrong. But I think this is a great one for someone to tackle.
Yeah, 7119.
7119, I apologize. Yeah, I think that's a great one. And I'll try to tag it now and set up that label for, at least for the kops project, if I can. Are there other issues which people think might be good ones to discuss? That issue feels like it's a good one for someone that understands a bit of AWS, but doesn't necessarily, or clouds, because I think there's similar function in other clouds, but is newer to kops or something like that. Doesn't require as much in-depth on kops, but does require more sort of understanding of how clouds work and what the right thing to do is there. As was pointed out in terms of the drain potentially being an unbounded and blocking operation. So it's not entirely clear what the correct behavior is. Are there other issues? Oh.
I have a few issues linked in the Hacktoberfest issue in the kops repo, which is 9920. At the very bottom of the issue, there's a couple GitHub links. They're both more around the kops API. So if anyone wants to have experience with that, and I think that's a bit simpler of a task, it's more kind of isolated. I think those would be good starting points. And I, or anyone else, or others, I should say, would be happy to provide assistance with those if anyone wants to tackle them. And I think they're particularly useful to have. I was just running into some of those issues myself this week.
Cool. Do you want to talk a little about what some of those are, or?
Sure. So the first one is kops issue 9845. I'll paste a link into chat. And so this is, currently we allow the Docker config, all of the flags you pass to the Docker daemon. That's defined at the cluster level, but there is a reasonable ask to have that be defined at the instance group level so that different auto-scaling groups could be using different Docker settings. And so essentially, I think that would just be a matter of adding the new Docker config field to the instance group. And then when we're parsing the struct, we would be kind of merging those. If there's a Docker config defined at the instance group level, use it. Otherwise, fall back to the clusters Docker config, that sort of thing. So I think that's fairly straightforward. And then the second issue is 6356, which is just adding at least one, maybe more kubelet flags. So all of kubelet's flags are defined as separate API fields within a big kubelet config struct in the kops API. And so anytime there's a new flag, we need to add a new field for it. And so this is asking for a housekeeping interval flag. And so I think we even have documentation in the kops docs about how to do this exact task. So I think that's pretty well defined there.
Those both seem like, as you say, both well defined and great. And I have applied the Hacktoberfest new Hacktoberfest with Halloween orange background label to both of them. Thank you. I see, Lubomir, you have a hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the kubelet is removing all its flags. So the more you bind into the API, the more you have to remove later. Basically, I would suggest that you try to follow the issue. I'm going to find it and move everything to the kubelet configuration API if possible. I'm not sure, Justin, if you are already handling the kubelet configuration.
It's certainly something, thank you for bringing that up. It's certainly something that, you know, this is all the whole component config. It's certainly something we've been tracking, I guess, since the dawn of kops. Like we have, we adopted the idea of having we embraced the idea of having a component configuration in a Kubernetes type. We did not follow the component config schema, largely because it didn't exist at the time. I know John is talking about the next version of the kops API, which you know, like would be a great opportunity to converge these two schemas. I think that would be really good. We could also talk about breaking them apart. The add-ons, so it's similar to the add-ons discussion in that today kops has a cluster specification with a bunch of cluster scoped things, including CNI configuration typically. There's also instance group configuration, which is the equivalent of machine deployment configuration. So in that big cluster spec object or spec, there are you know, configuration for CNIs, which probably eventually should go into add-ons, and there are configurations for the core components like kubelet, like API server, like scheduler, like kube controller manager, which I think we definitely want to converge the schemas in the long term. And I think there's a question of whether we should also think about extracting those into separate objects, which would make I think that would have a lot of benefits in that the cluster object in kops would become smaller, and it would mean that the whatever tool you're using, the configuration for setting a field on API server would be the same, right? If we can all agree that kops and kubeadm and cluster API should effectively use the API server component config as the primary means of configuration, I think that would be great for a user experience across the tools, and also enable us to sort of interoperate a little bit more than has been practical in the past. Like obviously, you know, like kops would like to use cluster API at some stage in the future, and if we can just say, oh well, look, we only have to bridge these, like this small set of subset of fields, that makes life a lot easier. I don't know how people feel about that.
Yeah, I think one thing to consider is kops is needing to support a wide range of Kubernetes versions. And so if different versions are using different component config versions, we need to make sure that kops can support writing all of those.
Yeah, it's somewhat unfortunate because the stated reasons for moving to the new config struct was to make it easier for cluster code like kops, and it actually has the effect of making it harder for us. But there we go.
If I recall correctly, kubeadm had some challenges with versioning of component config. Am I speaking correctly, Lubomir, or is that true?
Yes, I mean, it's configuration versioning. The problem has existed like before software existed, so we definitely have problems around that. What we ended up doing is we nowadays pass transparently the kubelet configuration as a blob of text, pretty much, and we let the component manage that. So we're just transparently passing it to the nodes, and that's it. If it fails, it's the responsibility of the administrator to check why that's happening. As you know, validation and conversion is not possible, so we just assume that the version schema that the user is passing is comparable with the target component.
This is going very well in my mind, because now this is looking more and more like these are the exact same problems we face with cluster add-ons, and I feel like I'm very happy with the people that are here, and like we have almost accidentally gathered the perfect set of people to have this discussion around like, can we, I think not everyone I think has probably looked at John's feedback on the initial integration of cluster add-ons. I think there were, it was great feedback. I think there were questions around these same issues around, I think John, you were more focused or primarily focused, I guess, on security concerns or security and manageability, but I think the same like correctness concerns and validation concerns apply here. How do we validate the data, interoperate with those, like externally managed projects, yet not tie ourselves to their lifetimes? Like I think you pointed out, if we're just going to re-embed all the controllers back into kops or back into whatever it is, like what's the point of splitting them out, right? And I think that's, so specifically, for example, like we could, of course, build in special logic to validate the AWS VPC CNI configuration. But we would like the AWS VPC CNI in the long term to be an add-on or an operator that can self-manage and self-update and do those sorts of things. How do we do that without baking in knowledge or too much knowledge of the AWS VPC CNI schema or even operator? And I don't know if anyone has any approaches there. I may have set the impossible challenge. Everyone's like, it's Oktoberfest. It's not like a year-long thing. I know that, how do people feel about execution of containers, like to validate? I don't know whether anyone has debated that internally or in their projects. So for example, specifically for the validation, the problem that Lubomir described, where we're going to validate the kubelet configuration. We could have a Docker container whose job it was to validate that kubelet configuration, and the tooling could execute that Docker container or execute that code somehow in some sort of, Docker being a sandbox, execute some sandbox code, which isn't part of the project, but is still referenced from the project. And I know that like Samtoshi, as part of Google Summer of Code, has looked at and in cluster add-ons, we've also discussed this notion of sort of one shot where we run something once to produce the manifests that are required, and that sort of behavior, rather than necessarily using a full operator. I don't know whether, I feel like I'm wittering. I don't know whether anyone wants to jump in and save me.
We have definitely discussed the idea of a container, like an ephemeral container doing some work. Not the ephemeral container feature that is coming to Kubernetes, but in general, a container that is doing a task and then disappearing. In fact, I believe I proposed to Cluster API to use the kubeadm binary in the container to upconvert the kubeadm API version. This idea was turned down. I do not recall why. But also, if you want to run the kubelet in a container to validate its own component config, you face the problem where there are no flags for that. There's no like mode for the kubelet binary to validate configuration. So there has to be something like -- validate. Otherwise, you're making assumptions that this particular container is not going to fail for other reasons and not the component config itself being invalid. Also, we proposed to API machinery to do the same to the controller manager API server. I haven't spoken to scheduling, but we had this idea to pretty much enable the validation on all the core components. If we do that, we enable users to perform validation on demand, because currently, as some of you may know, validation and conversion is only possible inside the component itself. You cannot extract it without forking the component source code. So I like this idea. I would love to see how this goes if you proceed with it, but we still may have to add these flags to do the explicit validation.
Yeah, thank you for saving me. I think I'd love to hear in a minute from Nadir about why, like, whether he has any insight into why the cluster API wasn't keen on this. I think I don't think it's unreasonable. I am rarely in the position of defending this particular stake, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say that we can do this. We can prove this first in something like cluster add-ons and show that it works before we make changes to KK. I feel like we can do that validation. If we can agree, if we feel this is a good thing to do, we can change KubeBuilder or KubeBuilder declarative pattern or other tooling, or just hand write one to create a validator that works for some add-on, and then show that it is useful and valuable. And then we can go and say to Kube Controller Manager that they should add this validate flag. I feel like that's a reasonable course of action rather than demanding they speculatively add it to KK. For anyone that doesn't know, KK is Kubernetes, the core repo. Sorry, I apologize for using jargon. Nadir, do you recall why what the feedback was from Cluster API around the idea of executing KubeADM?
I don't remember that discussion, but I suspect we didn't really want to shell out inside the controller at the time. I think that might be less of a concern if there's a well-defined contract around validation and we get programmatic output rather than having to regex parse output from a command. But I can take it as action item to find out.
I believe Jason is familiar with this topic. At least this is a person I remember participated.
Okay.
The baking the binary into the image, into the controller, as you say, is a good point, and it brings with it like versioning challenges versus we've pulled it out of the code, but we have not pulled it out of the packaging problem, as it were. So now we still have to do a new release of Cluster API or kops to produce a self-contained image. I don't know if you have thoughts, or other people here have thoughts around taking a dependency on Docker, or the requirement to be able to run Docker containers. And I know Nick, Red Hat has looked at this a lot. How to is it okay to take a dependency on Docker in the client where we run a CLI tool, for example, which could be in CI, and could itself be in Kubernetes? And is it okay to take a dependency on executing a container in a controller, like the Cluster API controllers?
So I am personally pretty biased with this. I think that we've had a lot of trouble with containerized environments and taking dependencies on CLI with something like Docker, because it requires a daemon with root privileges, and now you need to run a privileged container to run in your build, and now that has a whole slew of other requirements. I know there's, I believe Podman can run without a daemon, but I mean, it's probably simple if you're doing something that's building things to integrate with those packages themselves directly to build your stuff and run it. You might always need privilege though to run a container. Yeah. But yeah, I know there's other things like OCI out there that allow you to do it for OCI images. So I digress.
That's great. I see Nadir has a hand up. I'll also raise my hand.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be hard no for Docker in a controller, given that none of the image builder images for cluster API even ship with Docker. It's containerd only. I think there's, I don't know, I think there is a proposal in progress to move Docker shim out of KK anyway. So yeah, that's a no-go. CLI, I mean, cluster cuttle, which is the CLI for cluster API, uses kind. So I guess there is some assumption around Docker. It's not ideal, but it has to be hard no for the controller.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm about to raise my hand. Because I'm a co-host. I think I'm next though. I don't want to like overtrain on Docker per se versus like Podman type thing. Like if it's Docker or Podman, I think that's fine. I think I guess my question, to Nick is like, what is the alternative to container execution for packaging or container packaging? Like, do you have an idea on how to do it? Is it the case that we would have to, like, for example, in the case of kops, which might have to install a dozen CNIs, we would have to package validating binaries for those dozen CNIs in some sort of kops distribution, like build distribution, and update it whenever there's a new version of Calico or a new version of Cilium or whatever it is. I mean, that's a fine answer. I just wanted to know if that's sort of what you would lean towards. Go ahead, Nick. Yeah, I don't think you need to raise your hand.
I'm trying to be good. I jumped in last time. So we've been doing a lot of work in trying to decide if there's a good, just plain JSON format or something that can describe the configuration for an operator on our side, which is like a set of manifests plus a set of metadata. And those manifests have some URI somewhere that you can go grab it at, and that may or may not be in a container image itself. Because we've been running into very similar problems. The result of that is not clear yet. I don't know if that helps at all.
It does not help. I think it's not an answer really, but it's great to hear that, yes, that we're all sort of dealing with the same thing, and that unless anyone has answers, I think we can table this and hopefully make some. I'd love to make some progress on this topic in Hacktoberfest. There are two. I think the two scenarios are very different. Like I think it's important to keep in mind the CLI scenario and the controller scenario separately. And I'm more confident in the controller scenario. Like I feel like we could spin up a job or a pod temporarily and somehow do that. Than I am in the CLI scenario. So it's interesting to hear that, Nadir, you seem more confident in the CLI scenario. Nadir, go for it.
Yeah, actually, running a pod is more reasonable rather than just not execing Docker directly inside a controller. But creating a new pod and getting results from that, that's fine. And we do that, for example, in Sonobuoy, which is the conformance checking thing. That's exactly how Sonobuoy operates. The only other thing we also need to take into consideration is air-gapped environments. So you need a situation where you can either point at a different registry, so it's internal to that environment, or some method to sort of preload all of the images onto whatever the bootstrap mechanism is, so it doesn't have to reach out to the internet.
Absolutely right. Nick, I see your hand is still up. I don't know if that's a holdover from prior raising, and I'm going to assume yes. I know that exact topic, the air-gapped topic, came up in John's security manageability list of concerns. I think there are better. I think I sort of punted that can down the road. I don't know how John feels about that, by sort of saying like, yes, we should absolutely solve this, but it's very not specific to cluster add-ons. That, you know, we want to make sure that those same concerns apply to all the images, right? We want to make sure that the images are all mirrored somewhere for your Kubernetes version that you have control over it, that you can see what images they are, that you can validate them. There are some projects that do this. I don't know whether anyone here is successfully or on less successfully using any of the mirroring tools that are available, or any of the container policy or container image policy, image pull policy, any of those sorts of things to sort of enforce their containers, enforce their images, I should say. Sounds like it's early adopter time. So yes, I agree. It's very like there are a bunch of problems there, and Containerd makes I think Containerd makes some of it easier in that you are able to set up mirrors with Containerd. It doesn't talk about how those mirrors get populated, and it doesn't talk about how we can be sure. Like I think John raised the excellent point that with an operator you no longer can really see, like you're once removed from seeing what image you're going to run, and so like the scope of things you have to trust is much larger. I had originally scheduled this for I think an hour and a half to end at 10:30. I don't know if there are other topics that people want to bring up. Our traditional time is about an hour, and that seems to be what most people can focus for or make time in their busy calendars for. If there are not other topics, I propose that we can follow up in the kops developer Slack channel initially, and we will likely create a Hacktoberfest channel if people feel that's of interest for these cross-topic ones. I don't know whether people have views. I'm wary of creating a sort of ephemeral discussion channel, but maybe that's what Slack is. Like these. If we have a great discussion around how to like implement cluster add-ons in kops and cluster API and kubeadm, like we don't want it to disappear on November 1st.
Given this is initially a kops, October event, maybe it should be the kops channel for now. Are you proposing something like a generic channel in the case Slack?
I wasn't sure what the right way. I don't know. I want to somehow encourage participation. I don't want to require people to work on kops related things if they don't want to. But I also want to say we have to start somewhere. So I like the idea of starting with kops developers and in Slack, and we can farm out from there, I guess. Like certainly the cluster add-ons one, we can move, like all the projects have channels, so we can presumably redirect to the most appropriate channel.
Yeah, that feels right to me. You can also get feedback on the generic channel in Contribex. I'm sure they will have an opinion about such a channel, I guess.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like, and oh, sorry, I should give people time to raise any other topics they would like to. How do people feel about like pair programming and streaming that sort of thing, or programming and streaming that? Do you think that's good or not good? Has anyone tried doing that? And then I'll let everyone go back to their daily lives.
I personally think this is great, and also I think the code-based walkthroughs, detailed or not, are also great. We should definitely have more of that in the Kubernetes project. In fact, we should host pretty much weekly events of this type, because this is a great way to get the itches going in people. Like, hey, I really want to get involved in this particular package. It's interesting to me. Yeah, I think this is a very good idea. And if kops pilots something like that, I will definitely try to approach other SIGs and people to look at this idea.
Cool. Well, I mean, that's something I think might be fun. I've always, whenever I've done something like that, I've always learned stuff from it. So I feel like I can maybe look at doing some sort of streaming type event. I think Peter's reminded me we should decide on a time for our next meeting. We can also do that in another doodle or in, actually, did Did we have a Wednesday, Peter, did we have a Wednesday time slot that was otherwise voted very highly?
I added a link right above today's agenda in the Google Doc. The doodle says there is the other vote, or the time slot with 4 votes was a Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. There was also 3 votes for Wednesday at 10 a.m.
I can do Tuesday. I can do either slot. We wanted to not be too close to the Friday slot. I could do Tuesday at 9 a.m. And we can figure out what we do in that slot. I don't imagine we want everyone to, or I don't imagine everyone wants to show up every couple of days for a chat, but I think it could be fun if people. I'm sure that we'll find something to do. It could be broadcasting coding. It could be pair programming for coding. It could be digging down into one of these topics. So I'm gonna mentally reserve that slot, at least unless anyone disagrees, and we can make that the next time, and we will leave the agenda undecided. So if anyone has anything they want to discuss at that time, Tuesday 9 a.m. Eastern, they are very welcome to add stuff, and we'll figure out what the right place to do is on Slack in the kops developer channel, and no obligation to attend. And I want to say thank you to everyone that did attend and stuck through to the end of this meeting. And I think next steps are to see you all hopefully on the kops developer channel, where we will farm out fun ideas and talk about these things, and possibly split into like it sounds like there's a cluster add-ons discussion that will likely come out of this. If anyone else has any closing thoughts, please say so. Otherwise, thank you all for attending, and hope to see you throughout the month of Hacktober.
Thanks. I think this is great.
Awesome. Thank you.